Welcome to the CondoVultures.com podcast with your host, Peter Zalewski, a Miami real estate broker, Wall Street consultant, and expert witness. This podcast is focused on identifying real estate buying opportunities in the South Florida condo market of Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. The CondoVultures.com podcast is not authorized by the South Florida real estate industry and will most likely annoy many of the region's talking heads. This podcast will feature straight talk and salty language that could be offensive to some. Please remember that past investment success does not determine future gains, especially in South Florida's volatile condo market. For more information, please visit CondoVultures.com. Don't buy a South Florida condo, discounted or distressed, before taking a Condo Vultures correction tour. CondoVultures.com offers weekly bus and walking tours that focus on educating buyers on the how-tos of identifying discounted condos, analyzing the opportunities, and purchasing units. Every tour attendee receives a list of all condo projects in a particular market, a market assessment handout, and unmatched expert analysis. For more information on the condo correction tours, please visit condovultures.eventbrite.com.
This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures podcast. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. And I wanted to alert you that if you have a property that you're looking to sell in the Tri-County, South Florida area, I would encourage you to reach out to Jenny Cortez, a licensed real estate broker with cvrrealty.com. She's my partner. She's been in the business for north of 15 years. More importantly, she knows the market. She knows how to get a deal done. And she also realizes that it's more important to get a price that you can accept and sell the property rather than to hold firm on some price that's never going to be achieved and ultimately languish on the market. So if you're looking to do a deal that you want a skilled expert who can help you sell a property, reach out to Jenny Cortez at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859, or visit her website, cvrrealty.com. Welcome to Miami Reporters Roundtable. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski from Condo Vultures. Welcome to season 4 of our podcast series. We began it back in 2020. Took a couple of weeks off, actually a couple months off, try to do a couple revamp, try to make things a little bit more modern, dragging all of us old dinosaurs up into the present. So if you notice some changes, these are all things that we've been working on. And if you have any suggestions for us, you, the audience, please go ahead and send us a message via Twitter, or you can do it via Instagram. This is our new handle. It's Miami RRP, Miami RP. It's not ARP. I'm under 50, so I wouldn't qualify. I can't speak for the others, but basically, if you want to get a hold of us, you want to comment, you want to make a suggestion, send it either Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok at Miami RP, which stands for Miami Reporters Roundtable Podcast. So all that being said, let me go ahead and tell you what we're going to do, and then let me introduce our guests this week. So for our podcast, what we do is I handpick a number of stories, 6 stories to be exact, and I present them to current and former journalists, ask them to go ahead and analyze the stories and cut through all the fluff that's out there and help you, the audience, understand what's really going on behind the scenes. And the idea is to bring some entertainment as well as some information to you, whether you are an investor, whether you are a real estate professional, or whether you're somebody who's sitting on the sidelines and just like to be a gadfly and get a sense of what's going on out there in the world. So with all that being said, let me go ahead and I'm going to introduce our guests this particular week. All 3 of them are regular contributors to the podcast. They all date back to 2020 when we first launched this podcast, way back in season 1. And from that point, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get into the 6 stories that I handpicked. We're going to start off with a gentleman. He's got his own public relations firm. He was a journalist for over 25 years, primarily in the state of Florida. Right now, he does public relations and marketing. His name of his firm is Gruss Communication. You can get a hold of him at grusspr.com. It's no one else but John Gruss. What's going on, Mr. Gruss, and how was your summer break?
Fantastic. And I'm really happy to be back on your unauthorized podcast.
It's great to have you, Sean. Great to have you. We got some great stories. We're going to be able to bring people up to speed with what's really going out there. There's a lot of mixed currents in terms of information, and you're one of the go-to guys to help us understand what's going on in the marketplace. Another gentleman who's a go-to person, sort of understanding the marketplace. This gentleman was a reporter for, what was it, Oscar, 20 years, 30 years. I had a gig with the South Florida Business Journal, Miami Daily Business Review, worked for the Associated Press, basically been anywhere and everywhere. He's going to give us his take on what's going on. That's someone who right now does his own consultancy. He does public relations and marketing. He's an advisor. That's Oscar Musibay. What's going on, Mr. Musibay, and how was your summer break?
I'm excited to be here, which says a lot about my summer, but I'm looking forward to hearing everybody talk about real estate, which is the best business in town.
It is the best business in town. And then finally, our fourth person on this particular podcast is a gentleman who was a journalist for over 2 decades. He wrote about white-collar crime, and he wrote about business stories, and he also did restaurant reviews. That gentleman right now does public relations and marketing. He's a consultant. He's also a New York Jets fan. We're recording this in greater downtown Miami. At least that's where I am. And he is in Miami Dolphins, NFL territory, and he proudly is a New York Jets fan. So if you are an NFL football fan, you know that the Jets have made a major acquisition during this offseason, acquiring someone who might make it in the Hall of Fame, a quarterback called Aaron Rodgers. So that being said, Mr. Fakler, how are you doing today? John Fakler, how are you doing today? And what is your outlook on the New York Jets, the hated New York Jets football team?
Peter, it's great to be back with the gang. I'm really looking forward to the upgrades we have. I noticed that I'm better looking suddenly than I was before. As far as the Jets, I'm geeked up. Tonight is Hard Knocks. The Jets are on Hard Knocks this year. Tonight is the initial segment. So I'm very excited to see Aaron Rodgers, who I think last time we talked about it was still on the chopper. He still hadn't been signed. So he's been signed now. And I know you were giving me a hard time about that, if they were going to get him, but they've got him. And of course, I'm very excited about the football season.
Fantastic. Now, gentlemen, one of the changes some of our audience might recognize or realize as they start to listen or watch this podcast, and keep in mind, you can find the audio version of our podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. And if you want to watch it, you can actually watch it on Spotify or you can go to YouTube where you'll be able to pick it up. Just go to Condo Vultures TV. You'll be able to pick it up there. But guys, what I want to throw out there, if anybody has comments or if they want to reach out to you, maybe they want some consulting services, or maybe they want to do they don't necessarily agree with you. What's the best way for them to reach you? Let's start off with John. John, somebody wants to get a hold of you. How should they get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me through Twitter. My handle is @Jean Gruss, and they can get a hold of me also on Instagram at GrussCom, and that's GRUSSCOMM. And they can reach me via email, Jean@GrussPR.com. Of course, I have a message service through GrussPR.com as well.
Fantastic. And Oscar, how do people get a hold of you?
So on Twitter, Musibay, a reporter. And then on Instagram, you can find me at Oscar Musibay.
Perfect. And Mr. Fakler, are you going to go snail mail with us, or
No.
you get her on Instagram?
Listen, I'm getting with it. Best way to reach me is probably through Twitter. My handle is @JT Fakler, Fakler. But of course, you can reach me regular email, which is fakler@consultantssingular.com.
Fantastic. And if anybody wants to, again, get a hold of myself or anything regarding the podcast, simply send it via Instagram, TikTok, and or Twitter. It's @MiamiRRP. Again, not AARP. These guys are old. I'm not. Miami RP. All right. Before we get into our stories, let me go ahead and tell you our sponsor. Our sponsor today is going to be myself. And what's going on? I have a real estate consultancy and also do some brokerage. If you have any questions, if you have any, you want to do any kind of analysis, anything like that, go ahead and check out my website. You can go to condovulturesrealty.com, condovulturerealty.com. So that being said, guys, let's go ahead. We're going to go with the free stories that I handpicked from a local as well as national press, send them off to the journalists, and then ask them to read them, and then ultimately comment. I'll ask each person to comment on one story. And if somebody else wants to chime in, feel free to let it rip. Remember, this is an unauthorized podcast, and we might offend, but we will give you straight talk. At least that is the goal, and that is the intention. We're going to start off with Mr. Fakler. John Fakler, from the time that our third season ended to the time that our new season 4 began, there was a major sporting announcement that occurred, I'd say not only in Miami, but definitely nationally and possibly internationally. That is this gentleman called Lionel Messi. He goes by Leo. He goes by a variety of different things. He's a stud. He used to play for Barcelona. He used to play in Paris. He was part of the Argentinian national team that won the World Cup last year. He's now signed with Inter Miami, which is a team that is owned and controlled by former soccer great or football great David Beckham, is funded primarily by a gentleman and his family that's tied to basically laying cables in and around the United States. A guy called Jorge Mas. and his company is called Mustang. So, Mr. Fakler, for the background, let me read you the first couple graphs of the story. I don't want to get you to comment because I know just recently you were lucky enough to go to one of Messi's matches when Inter Miami played Orlando City. So let me read the first couple graphs. I don't want to get your take on it because anything Messi related seems to be catching the attention of the world lately as we record this here in August of 2023. So the headline, Mr. Fakler, is coming out of Miami New Times, and I'll read you the first couple graphs. Headline, La Barra Bar celebrates Lionel Messi's Inter Miami unveil with a new Messi burger. Subhead, La Barra Burger in North Miami Beach is offering the Messi burger to hail Argentinian soccer star Lionel Messi's arrival in South Florida. First couple graphs, Mr. Fakler. One of those South Florida's best burger restaurants has unveiled a specialty sandwich in honor of one of the world's best soccer players, and they both hail from Argentina. La Barra Burger in North Miami Beach is celebrating the arrival of star professional soccer player Lionel Messi with a new specialty burger that's especially Messi. The Argentine-based brand, known for its large assortment of over-the-top burgers, launched a new menu item, the Messi, on July 10th, a nod to the jersey number of Messi has worn for teams in Argentina, Spain, and France, and it's believed will be the one that he dons it for Inter Miami. Mr. Fakler, talk a little bit about Messi, your take on it, whether or not you think Inter Miami and Major League Soccer, MLS, in the United States, what kind of impact has it had? And will it all get shut down as soon as the National Football League, the NFL season, begins in September?
Well, I don't think it's going to be shut down. I have to tell you, I'm very excited about this. I'm someone I couldn't give a rat's ass about soccer at one point, but I got sucked into this whole Messi mania. And being at the stadium, you actually can see the game better than football. I've gone to plenty of new NFL games where you're up in a cheap sheet, so it looks like ants when you look down. Here, at the smaller stadiums, the MLS stadiums, you can actually see the game, and it's exciting. People get jacked up. I never saw so much excitement. The clubs, you have the club issue. I know I belong to one of the clubs now. So I'm really, I've been sucked in. I'm actually excited about it. I don't think football season, the NFL football season, will interfere with this at all. I think the mania right now, the Messi mania, it's long lasting. I think it's going to be long lasting.
And Mr. Fakler, just to piggyback on that, what about from a real estate perspective? Are we going to see any impact on the real estate market?
Something that's a really good question. We do, of course, have a lot of Argentinians that live in the South Florida area, particularly in Miami. I do think it might actually help with international sales. It's for those with money. They're looking for a second home here, Argentinians. I can't see it hurt the real estate market as far as sales go. But that's just a guess.
Interesting. Oscar, Jean, either of you want to comment on the Messi, hoopla and chaos that's ensued for the last month or so?
So I think that everyone should be making Messi related food. Everybody should have some food named after Messi. This guy is the biggest name in sports around the world. I love the Dolphins. I grew up with the Dolphins. Marino is the biggest name in town, but this guy's even bigger because soccer is a worldwide sport and has been forever. We're just catching on now. As far as real estate goes, real estate is being impacted already because there are a lot of stories in all kinds of media about Messi looking to buy property here, a house to live in. And he already owns property in Miami, Porsche Design, and also, I believe, Regalia. And this is going to add to the character, to the way people view Miami as an international city with a lot of glamour. And he's a family man, so he's looking for something where he can have a yard and have his kids go to a great school. And all of that is going to add to how people view Miami as an important city. And it's impacting real estate because other athletes have been investing in Miami for a long time. And now more of them are going to look to put their money here. And it's really moving a lot of real estate, a lot of stories every day about where Messi is looking. There was a story about him at Publix because he went to Publix in Broward. So that gives you a sense.
Publix, the supermarket chain.
Exactly. That gives you a sense of how crazy the media is over this guy, anything he does, anytime he's seen, there's going to be a story. So that's great for Miami. The more media attention, the more people are going to want to live here, move here, play here. And that's great.
Yeah, I have a little bit more of a skeptical perspective on it. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the time Pele came to play in the U.S. I think he played for the Cosmos, I think. It was New York's team. And there was a lot of hoopla. Pele, of course, biggest superstar in the world at the time. And the whole thing fizzled out. Soccer never took off like everybody thought it would when Pele came. And of course, he was at the twilight of his career, a little bit like Messi. And Messi is not a young guy anymore. Obviously, he comes off the World Cup. Honestly, he's pretty advanced in age. And so I don't know how many more years he's going to be playing. This is a very crowded sports market. We have baseball, football, hockey, countless other sports. It's a super crowded market. And I think soccer has a lot of appeal, but I'm not quite sure it has NFL level appeal or basketball level appeal. I think it's very segmented. And to be honest, obviously Messi coming to Miami is a great PR win. Let's see how often he's going to play and let's see what the impact is. I'm just a little more skeptical about it. I think right now we're riding the wave, but it might be too soon to tell.
I cannot disagree more with John in this case, because the United States has been moving towards raising soccer to a level that is, I think, equal to the NFL for many years now. And the U.S. team, the U.S. men's team, and the U.S. women's teams have been amazing. So for the first time, I think we're reaching a level of depth in soccer that is changing how people view it. And I hear this all the time that, like John was saying a minute ago, soccer was not something he was paying attention to. But you go to the games, you see the players, there are fewer on the field, so you can actually get a sense of where the action is. And I think it's changing how people view the sport. And you can tell that by the pricing of the tickets, because the tickets were, what were they, Peter? You've been following ticket sales closely.
Well, I too, like Mr. Fakler, am a member of a supporters club. It's called Vice City. I actually brought him in. I don't know why, but I did. I offered it to Jean and Oscar too, just for the record.
Right.
And Messi signed on a Wednesday. Prior to, there was a scuttlebutt about how he might be signing. So on the Saturday before his signing, which was on a Wednesday, I bought a pair of tickets for $17 a ticket with fees. As soon as he signed, they went to $4.50 per ticket, just to give you an idea. So basically a $34 investment was suddenly worth $900 overnight. Now, part of it has to do with the fact the stadium only holds, at the time it held 18,000. They've now increased it to 22,000 by bringing in some temporary bleachers. But that being said, a lot of people want to get a touch. They want to see him. They want to experience them. So they're bidding up the prices. Whether or not it carries over in the next year, nobody really, but ticket prices are through the roof right now.
Right. Yeah, we'll wait and see.
Yes, we will definitely wait and see. That being said, let's go on to our next story. For this next story, Oscar, we're gonna stick with you. This story is coming out of CNBC. Let me read you the headline and read you the first couple graphs, and I'm going to ask you to comment. Headline: The death of remote work? ? Zoom orders workers to return to the office at least twice a week. Linda Moynihan, the New York Post reporter, she joined Squawk Box this week to discuss the fact that the state of remote work, i.e. Zoom, who we all remember during the pandemic, that was the go-to in terms of being able to be at home and people were able to communicate and make things happen. Zoom's now requiring employees to come into the office at least 2 days a week. Mr. Musibay, my question to you is Miami's whole pitch in terms of tight real estate market. We need more supply. Prices are going to only go up because everybody can live in Miami and they can work for a company out of Silicon Valley in California. They can work for a company out of New York. They work for a company out of London. They can be in Miami because of Zoom and others. Is that suddenly called into question now that Zoom, the originator of it, the verb, is suddenly telling its employees, oh, you can't Zoom anymore. You need to pack your shit and get in the office at least 2 days a week. What say you, Mr. Musibay?
The fact that Zoom is doing this is important.
Okay.
And other companies have already done this. Big public companies have already done the same thing. And even Dark Brandon, Joe Biden in the White House, has told and encouraged agencies to call federal workers back. But in the Zoom case, it's 2 days a week. And I think generally that's how people are approaching their businesses. They're still trying to make it flexible to allow people to work from home at least part-time. The result of this is enormous, very negative on the office market. Places like Chicago, New York have already been reporting a major expectation of defaults on mortgages related to the purchases or development of office buildings. It's a massive problem. And we were not thinking ahead about what was coming when COVID was going on. COVID made this happen. Everybody was working from home. And then when it ended, effectively because of the vaccines, some people didn't go to their offices. Most did not. And now we're dealing with the consequences. All these buildings have been built. So the question is, how will the real estate market respond to that? And some of the response has been to try and turn those office buildings into residences. How much conversion is there going to be, investment, that kind of risk in trying to convert those buildings to residences is a huge question mark that will probably be the next shoe to drop. Is there enough opportunity? But I just read a story today that the banks are not lending on office buildings. So it's a tough for, I guess, extensions of mortgages or debt related to office buildings, or you can't get a new loan. So it's going to be very difficult to get through these next couple of years related to office buildings, trying to figure out what the best solution is. Because I don't think a call that is not enforceable to get people back into offices is going to work. I mean, it's either everybody goes back 5 days a week or nothing. You can't have, let's try 2 days a week. That's not going to work. And the reality is that the consequences of part-time work is going to continue to wreak havoc on the office market. And we don't know where this thing is going to end. It's going to be an important trend and consequence of COVID that we're going to feel for many years.
Now, John, I want to go to you with story number 3. But before we do, let me ask Oscar. So, Oscar, you talk about office. I'm interested in residential. What about all the people who came to Miami and South Florida? They bought a condo. All the New York press wrote about all these people are living in Miami and they're working for a New York or California company. What are these people going to do with their condo if they have to go in the office, in Zoom's case, 2 days a week, or in the case of a lot of other companies, 3 or 4 days a week? Do they maintain their condo or their single family home in South Florida and then they go back and forth, or they look to dump it onto the market? And I will tell you, overall inventory in South Florida from a condo perspective is right now a seller's market. So what do you anticipate, Mr. Musibay?
So I think that's an important question to understand and figure out, because the reality is that we just saw numbers come out, census numbers that indicated that tens of thousands of people have left Miami-Dade County in the last few years. And Florida as a whole is gaining residents.
Oscar, if I could interrupt you there, we are going to get into that. So you're foreshadowing one of our stories. So I don't want you to talk
Yes,
too much
thank
about
you,
that.
Oscar.
I want to know about our people who bought homes
Right.
in South Florida during the pandemic, and they
Yes.
work for a company that's not in South Florida. What are they going to do with their properties? They're going to sell? They're going to try to rent? And what is it going to mean for supply?
I was getting to that. Thank you for letting me. So what those numbers indicate is that those people are moving back to wherever their offices are. So what are they going to do with their homes? They're going to have to sell them or rent them. Right now in Miami-Dade, there isn't enough inventory, and that's why rents are going through the roof, and they're going to continue to be expensive. And that creates an opportunity for people who moved here to work virtually and have to go back to their offices because they can rent out their apartment, their single family homes to people who will live here or can live here. And I think that is where things are going to head. I can't imagine that they're going to dump their properties, because it's not a practical solution. Our pricing is going up on housing. Our pricing is not going down. It's going up. And we are one of the few places in the country, if not the only place where we're seeing that. So a person who bought a property here is going to try and maximize their investment, and hopefully they'll be able to find renters rather than dumping it at a price that is below the value that they invested.
Great. Which is a perfect segue for John. John, we're going to go to you with story number 3, and it has to do with mortgage interest rates, which is perfect for Oster because he says some of the people are going to look to sell. They're going to try to get top dollar. But if money costs more to get your hands on, you obviously can't pay as much. So that is the segue. Let's get into your story, John. This also, too, is coming from CNBC. Headline, mortgage credit availability sinks to a decade low. And there's 2 key points. The MBA's, which is the Mortgage Broker Association's monthly index measuring credit availability, dropped in July to the lowest level since 2013, indicating that lending standards are tightening even further. Point number 2, while availability for all loan types dropped, jumbo loan availability decreased the most. Mr. Gruss, what do you make of the fact that a lot of people paid a lot of money to come down here and buy these condos? They were going to live here. They were going to telecommute, if you will. Now Zoom and others are calling them back in the office, and interest rates are sky high, north of 7%. What's your take on this, and what does it mean for South Florida real estate, John?
Yeah, actually, last week they were north of 8%. I did a little research on mortgage rates in Florida. You got to have sterling credit. You got to have a super well-paying job that's going to cover your mortgage nut. And the fact of the matter is banks are now under pressure because of rising interest rates, and they're going to be super careful about who they lend to. And honestly, the money supply is shrinking. The Federal Reserve's raising interest rates. The 10-year bond upon which most mortgages are based on is all of a sudden is jumping back to 52-week highs. So the fact of the matter is that rising interest rates means property values are going to have to drop. It's simple as that. We haven't seen it yet, but my anticipation is prices are going to drop. In the resale market, for all intents and purposes in South Florida, has basically collapsed. 30 to 50% drops in home and condo resales. It's basically come to a stop, and higher interest rates are certainly a part of that. A lot of people who perhaps may have overpaid for homes, like 2% mortgages, are looking at 7 or 8% mortgages now, and they're not going to sell. Why would they sell? They go to another home and overpay, and then they'd have, on top of that, they'd have a 7 or 8% mortgage. And the market's basically frozen. So, and banks are under pressure now. We've had a bunch of bank failures. Today, one of the credit rating agencies downgraded a whole bunch of regional banks, saying that the rising interest rates are going to cause a lot of problems for them. And banks are now in capital preservation mode. So they're just not going to lend. And unless you have sterling credit, which not a lot of people have these days, people have a lot of credit card debt and all kinds of other debt. It's going to be really tough getting a mortgage, and that's going to affect real estate. And I think it's coming. I think property values are going to have to drop. I mean, it's just a consequence of rising interest rates.
Like they say, John, every time the Fed raises interest rates, that means the housing market has to slow. Just like every time they cut interest rates, that means that you're probably going to see an increase in appreciation of housing values. Any comment on that, John?
Yeah, it's just basic economics. And we've seen this over and over again. And Florida, has real high highs and real low lows, and it's boom and bust. Florida's boom and bust. And we've just been through a boom where peak property values, and now the music's going to stop because interest rates have risen. I just think that it's just a matter of time before property values have to decline because the market's basically frozen.
Great point. Speaking of boom and bust, let's go to that New York Jets fan, John Fakler. Mr. Fakler, we're going to come to you with this story, and it's a perfectly timed story. It has to do with what we've just been discussing. It's coming out of the Miami Herald. I'll read you the headline, first couple graphs, and I'm going to ask you to comment. Headline, so long, paradise. Long-timers and natives depart for homes outside of Miami-Dade County. First couple graphs. Miriam Marino's life might cause anyone to think she enjoyed the best of Miami-Dade County. On her $400,000 real estate salary, she said she could afford weekly dinners at the River Oyster Bar and the latest $6,500 Santa Cruz Tallboy mountain bike to ride on her next adventure to Costa Rica's Vuelta al Lago Arenal, or Olita River State Park in Miami. She traveled around the globe and owned 2 condos outright in Miami. For the Cuban-born 59-year-old, boy, a lot of people don't like to give their age in print, but she did here. For the Cuban-born 59-year-old whose family escaped Fidel Castro's communist regime in 1968, Marino has made it big in Miami, but in recent years, the quality of life declined. It declined on making $400,000 a year. And the city's allure has faded. Traffic became impossible. People that came in here were disrespectful. The developers get whatever they want, Marino said. It became a pirate town. Whoever has more money wins. With $1 million in her pocket from the sale of her condo, Marino left in April. 40 years in Miami, San Jose, the capital of Costa Rica. She bought a 700 square foot, 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom condominium for $150,000. She continues to work remotely, doing real estate consulting for a firm in Miami. Mr. Fakler, is that it for paradise? Are they writing the end of Miami once again, the end of paradise? How do you make $400,000 a year and you can barely scrape by? What say you, Mr. Fakler? Is there some hyperbole in here? Or is this like a hardship story where Mrs. Marino, who's 59, making $400,000, is been dealt a bad hand?
Now, there were 2 elements in this story that I really think are important, and that is the net loss of population in Miami-Dade, which happened during the COVID, when we had this huge influx of population here. So you would think there will be an increase in population in Miami-Dade, but in fact, there was a net loss, including the addition of population of this mass movement here.
Mr. Fakler, if I could interrupt, I didn't actually refer to the population decrease. It's later on in the story. So let me just tell the audience. According to the story, Miami-Dade County, its population declined by 28,000 to 2.67 million. This is something we discussed in season 3. The largest of the state's 67 counties, Miami-Dade lost the most. Broward County, they gained 2,700 residents, so it's a push. And then if you look at Palm Beach County, they rose by 26,300 residents, so about $1.5 million. So
Exactly.
Dade is down population, Broward is slight increase, and Palm Beach has spiked.
Exactly.
Please continue, Mr.
And there's been an overall increase in the state, according to those statistics. So it really does focus on Miami-Dade and about the people relocating out, the reasons why, infrastructure, noise problems. There's a million different things you can point to. And what was interesting, another takeaway that I thought was interesting was there's a delay. People are sitting back and waiting to saying, okay, the rents are up $500 a month in that 2-year period. In June, we established a high for pricing on homes. 650,000, I think, was close to the number. The condos were 450 or close to that number. That was a record in June, just last month or 2 months ago. So what's interesting is they're talking about there's a delay. People are leaving a little bit here and a little bit there, but I actually think if that continues and people can't find jobs that pay well enough to support themselves, there's going to be an exodus out of Miami-Dade. Where will they go? They'll go back to where they came. Maybe they'll go back to Broward and Palm Beach. Listen, it makes sense. Somebody in the story talked about going to Boca and just taking the Bright Line. And, I'll take the Bright Line into the city if I need culture. I'll take it from Boca into Miami.
And for the audience, the Bright Line is a high-end, privately owned rail service.
Exactly. So I think the problem's going to get worse before it gets better as far as this people leaving Miami-Dade.
Mr. Fakler, before we go to John with the next story, question to you. What does it take for you to leave Miami and move elsewhere?
I'm not going to lie. I've been thinking about it myself. And it's just, I might even relocate to upstate New York where it's cheap living. And I have friends up there. But it's just something I've considered. But my life is here. My friends, my colleagues, my work. It's not that easy to just pick up and leave. But I'll tell you, it's something that I think a lot of people are considering.
So I think to jump in here, the story referenced her quality of life, not that she was dealt a bad hand. And everyone's quality of life is different, especially when you're getting older. And she is deciding what her future is or has decided that. And there are a lot of people, as we were just discussing, that are looking at Miami in a whole new way because of all these different things that are here. What's interesting to me, and I think is indicative of how the city is changing, and attracting a different group of people is the number of new high-end restaurants that are opening here every other day. And it is remarkable. And you scratch your head and you say, where is the population that can support that many restaurants? And I think that is the canary in the coal mine here.
Can I just add that we talked a little bit earlier about the Messi effect of Latins and Argentines specifically moving here, but I don't think that's going to be enough to offset the exodus. It may put the number down as far as people leaving, but I don't think it's going to make a big difference.
So Miami has always been a focus of gentrification for Latin Americans. They've been coming here for decades, and their situation in their home countries is usually the catalyst for their move here. When there is chaos or a bad economy somewhere in Brazil or Venezuela or Colombia, then there are more people from those countries coming here. We have a big influx of Russians that has been going on for decades. There are a lot of different groups that are looking to Miami increasingly because of the opportunity to spend their wealth. They can have big ships. The city of Miami, as well as other cities throughout South Florida, are increasing the ability to have bigger ships dock. In fact, Flagstone, which is on Watson Island, across from where the Miami Herald used to be, established a new pier to have these bigger ships. And whether you like it or not, that is where Miami is heading. It's been heading there for a long time. And the housing is supporting that idea because you see more and more expensive housing and luxury living and all these amenities that are being offered them, including exclusive restaurants and these new condominiums. So there is an exit of a certain group for whatever reason. We're not 100% clear. Probably a lot of it has to do with affordability. But in the short term, the interest rates being so high is a kind of block on that continued shift because, as John was saying a minute ago, if you sell your property, where are you going to go exactly? Anywhere in the country, you're going to get the same interest rate. So there may be an evaluation going on amongst local residents as to whether their quality of life is where it needs to be for them to stay here. But I don't think it's going to happen as quickly as they're suggesting, and that this shift, at least for now, is probably stalled.
Oscar, if I could just ask you though, you said the woman's 59, she's only making 400 grand a year and her quality of life has suffered. Typically, once you get long in the tooth, isn't healthcare much more important? Is that the right time to be venturing off to an area where, Costa Rica is beautiful. I've been, but you basically are relying upon healthcare that's not in the United States. And Miami has a healthcare tourism industry where people come here from Latin America, places like Costa Rica, in order to get the medical. So I sort of square that.
So quality of life issues can relate to everything from your housing to access to healthcare, to affordable healthcare that is quality healthcare, to being able to visit your grandkids or to find a good job. And the specifics of this real estate agent's case is hard to determine, other than the fact that they may be looking out to the United States for something that's more affordable.
Or, Jean, is this a situation where this woman does real estate? She knows it's at top of the market. She's dumping, going liquid, going overseas and waiting to circle back and take down the stuff that possibly she put people into, buy it from at a cheaper price.
Yeah.
Is that also a scenario?
I'm not a fan of anecdotal leads, honestly, because look, Miami-Dade is fully built out. Okay. There's no room. Palm Beach, it has tons of land. So it's that the population is growing in Palm Beach. Miami-Dade has a lack of land. And then obviously we're swapping out new residents who have a lot of disposable income and for people who have less income. So it makes sense that people with lower incomes are leaving. And the fact of the matter is Miami-Dade has always exported residents to the rest of Florida. In the number one area for growth in Southwest Florida, and I'm talking about Naples and Fort Myers, where I've spent quite a bit of time, the number one place that people immigrate from are Miami-Dade County. It's just an exporter of population. And what we constantly get in Miami is this constant flux of people coming in, new people coming in with more money, people with less money moving out. And the fact of the matter is that the lack of developable land means that you can't have this huge population growth that the rest of Florida is seeing. So when you see 28,000 people is really, in the scheme of things, out of a 2.6 million population, really not that much. I think this story made quite a bit of hullabaloo over numbers that really were like, the county's fully built out. You can't fit more people, and maybe in high rises and stuff. I thought it was like making a lot out of not big numbers. You know what I'm saying?
Interesting. John, we're going to stick with you with story number 5. This is coming out of Fortune, fortune.com. You guys remember the old magazine, fortune.com? I'm not even sure if they even print anymore. Do they print magazines?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. So here's the headline, John, and then I want you to comment. Headline: Trouble continues to mount in the office real estate sector, which Oscar foreshadowed, ruining it. But anyways, John,
he didn't
continuing the
ruin it.
headline.
I got some.
Thank you, by the way, Oscar. Yeah.
Continuing the headline: You can't get a loan today, in quotes. There's no liquidity in the marketplace. That is the headline. John, let me read you the first couple drafts. Richard Gottlieb has been with Keystone, a Philadelphia-based commercial real estate firm, for more than 18 years, and now he's the company's president and chief operating officer after a stint as a senior vice president. Like countless others, he attributed the distress within the office sector to the widespread shift towards remote work, which has significantly impacted the demand. Additionally, the area of inexpensive financing has come to an end, marked by the transition to an economic environment characterized by higher interest rates and stricter credit conditions. John, there's been a lot of talk about how basic office space and companies needing floors of office space within a building, those are the bad old days, if you will. As we go forward, nobody knows what the hell we're going to do with all this office space, other than the fact that maybe it can be repositioned as apartments. But the problem is, typically, from what I understand, is plumbing's a major issue. If you're going to put in a bunch of residences on an entire floor plate of a floor, it's going to cost a shit ton, and it's going to take a long time to do. What's your take on that, Sean?
Well,
what is the outlook for commercial real estate? This is something you've been following quite some time, and Oscar also alluded to it earlier. So what's the use, Sean?
Yeah. First of all, there's a bifurcation of the office market. There's like brand new, like awesome office space that allows for flexible work, that allows for teams to work together, plenty of natural light, amenities, things that'll bring people into work, gyms and daycares and restaurants and things like that. And then the other office market, the Class B and the Class C offices, those crappy buildings that were built 20, 30, 40 years ago. Who wants to go to work? Who wants to come to work, commute for an hour in Miami traffic, go to work in some of these crappy buildings, okay? Or would you rather come to work like 2 or 3 days a week in a brand spanking new, like nice office building with cafeteria and daycare and all kinds of amenities? Corporations are doing that. So there's the really nice new office buildings that are going up in Miami. There's brand new office towers being built in Miami, in Palm Beach, in Broward County. They're getting financing. I think there's a lot of the trouble is in the older office buildings, those obsolete buildings that are crappy that people used to put up with, but now who wants to go to work in them? So there's a whole lot of those. And there are a whole lot of those here in Miami-Dade and Broward and some in Palm Beach. And those buildings, those guys are in trouble because these brand spanking new buildings are really nice. And heck yeah, I'm tired of working at home. I'd like to come in a couple times a week and actually see people and be around people, work with my team and have some social interaction instead of being on Zoom 24/7. So I think there's there's 2 different office markets. And quite honestly, the buildings that are being built now, they're getting finance. We're seeing them being built here. So somebody's lending to these guys. Somebody is lending for these office buildings that are being built down here. Now, maybe South Florida is a bit of an exception because we've had an influx corporate users. We've had an influx of companies from Wall Street and Silicon Valley. A lot of companies have moved here for tax reasons and for quality of life reasons because the CEO doesn't want to live in New York anymore or Chicago or San Francisco. So they're coming here and they're hiring and they want office space. Yeah, okay, they may now not need as much office space, but they still like to have some people come in some of the time to work in team, get together. And then these buildings that are being built, like I'm looking at one at my window right now that's about to be completed in Brickell, and it is 100% leased. So somebody's getting financing, somebody's filling up these buildings, and they're technology companies. Now, Miami's a beneficiary of COVID and the move from these corporations that have realized that you don't have to be in New York, you don't have to be in Chicago or San Francisco. You can be in Miami and work here in this amazing city. So I think there's when you're reading about the troubles in the office market, you really have to slice and dice it and look at, okay, what kind of building are we talking about and where, the location and the quality and the amenities, because they're two different worlds.
Yeah, John, that's fascinating. It makes me wonder, some of these old medical office buildings, which have plenty of plumbing, and that seems to be the main issue associated with converting old office buildings into residential is the lack of plumbing. Some of these little small medical office buildings, I wonder if they wouldn't be perfect for small little studios or one beds or anything like that. Any thoughts before I go to Oscar, which are our last story of the night?
Yeah, everything I've read about converting office to residential is a complete non-starter.
Got it.
Just because of the expense, and it just doesn't make any sense. And it just
Got it.
Architecturally, engineering wise, everything, it just doesn't work. They just have to be torn down.
Perfect. I got it. So Oscar, we're going to go to you with story number 6. It's coming out of the Miami Real Deal. I'll read you the headlines in the first couple graphs. One of the reasons I chose this story, two reasons I chose the story. One, it's been the conversation all summer. It has to do with local politicians and a local developer who, by the way, was on our podcast a few years back. I did a podcast with him, and I will put a link in the description. So anybody who wants to go back and listen to that podcast from a few years ago, it might be interesting. Oscar, I'm going to read you the headline and read you the first couple graphs, and then let's see what your take on it is. Headline: brokerage tied to Coral Gables mayor netted $690,000 commission on Rishi Kapoor deal. Subhead: Location Ventures bought development site marketed by Rosa Commercial Real Estate. First couple graphs go like this. The brokerage linked to Coral Gables mayor Vince Lago netted a $690,000 commission in December from a sale of a development site in the city to Rishi Kapoor's Location Ventures. Lago, who abstained from city commission votes, including involving the property, then worked behind the scenes at City Hall to help Location Ventures land separate deals to possibly develop a parking lot owned by Coral Gables. Miami Herald reported. And it's the latest revelation of alleged conflict of interest and improper business practices during Kapoor's tenure as CEO of Location Ventures, the real estate development firm he founded in 2016. Last month, Kapoor resigned from the company as Location Ventures faces a wave of litigation from investors and vendors, as well as the fallout from burgeoning scandal involving secret consulting payments to Miami Mayor Francis Suarez. Now, Oscar, before you go ahead and comment, let's just put it out there. I've done a podcast with Rishi. Rishi sounds like a stand-up guy. I asked him a bunch of questions, very straightforward. Everybody in the United States is presumed innocent until proven guilty. No charges have been filed against him, although if you look at some of the reporting that's been done, there are investigations going on a federal level based on stories by the Miami Herald, as well as other publications. So sort of all of it. But really what I want to get into, Oscar, is A, do you have any opinions about what's going on? And B, how difficult is it to navigate? And you've written about real estate and you've known the real estate market for a number of years. How difficult is it to navigate the governmental or the planning and zoning process in South Florida, especially given the fact that the politicians making the decisions are making just a fraction of what the developers and the real estate agents are making once these new projects come online and are able to be sold out, especially when you get into deals where units are pricing and trading for north of $1,000 a square foot.
What I can say is that I can't comment on any investigation because I don't know the details. I haven't investigated any of the players or the specifics of any of these transactions. What I can say is that probably like in most cities around the country, all kinds of different parties work with attorneys and lobbyists and all kinds of people to get their projects reviewed or to have conversations with the people who are going to influence the decisions that impact their projects. And the people who are presenting those parties are making a lot of money, in addition to the developer, in addition to some of these other players. A lot of the politicians we have are real estate people, and they're making money through real estate transactions. So I think there's a lot more that has to be understood about these issues related to this story. And beyond that, I really can't say anything. I don't have any information. And generally, the way I work is if I've investigated a story, I can talk about it. If I can't, if I haven't, then I don't feel formed enough to be able to comment on something like that.
Mr. Fakler, you've been quiet for a while. Do you have any take on this this whole situation where governmental officials are benefiting, according to news stories coming out of the Miami Herald and other publications? Politicians are benefiting from real estate transactions related to and consulting payments allegedly paid by this developer and his former company. Yeah, and the reason I asked you is you used to write about white collar crime.
Yeah.
And some of the allegations that are being made here sort of raise the eyebrow.
Yeah. And it's not new. This is not a novel situation. At least what's been reported in the past, it's happened. I don't have specifics like what Oscar said, so I can't really talk about this specifically, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility.
Interesting. John, would you like to chime in?
Well, real estate is the business of Florida. It's as simple as that. And everybody's got a hand in real estate one way or another, whatever industry you're in. Honestly, the development business in Florida, this is how it works. It's wheeling and dealing. It's getting your projects approved. It's navigating the permitting and zoning process. It's a Byzantine thing. Who knows how it works? It's like, how do you know how sausage is made? And the fact of the matter is that, honestly, many people are in the real estate business. And the fact that you're a politician and in real estate doesn't make you a bad person. Perhaps you understand better than most how real estate works. And the fact of the matter is that we have a housing affordability crisis in South Florida. We need more housing. We need more development. It's really hard it's easy to jump to conclusions with all kinds of allegations. But the fact of the matter is that this is how Florida, it's always been a real estate market and everybody's involved. And there's a lot of wheeling and dealing, and some people are going to take advantage of it more than others. So,
yeah.
And by the way, we had reported on this before. I remember in season 3, we talked about some mayor that was involved in a real estate deal. It's been reported before. It's nothing new.
What I will say is this: being a journalist for a long time, I understand the implication and the inference that people can get from a story. The reality is, unless there are charges against someone, they didn't necessarily do anything wrong. And even if they did do something wrong, sometimes no charges are applied. What's important, I think, to understand is that the Miami Herald and other publications are investigating these issues and putting out stories that are important and should be considered in the big picture. And hopefully they can get to the root of whatever was going on and clarify it, because it may be that in the end, the journalists investigate these issues and determine for themselves that nothing illegal was done. Right. So the bottom line is, I think as more and more scrutiny is applied to the business of real estate in Miami, the better it's going to be.
Sure. Oscar, let me interrupt you. Let me take you in a different direction. So someone in a situation where allegations are being made, no charges have been filed, it's all just speculation. There is a lawsuit. anybody can file a lawsuit. How does somebody go about maintaining the reputation they built, not only now, but going forward in one of these situations? And all you guys are related to, you're all doing public relations and marketing and things like that. So do you have any words of wisdom or do you have any outlook of how this thing can play out?
The bottom line for someone in that situation is that they have to manage the information that's coming out without creating more risk. And that's a very difficult task when there are multiple reporters out there digging into the history of a particular transaction or more than one. In the case of a lawsuit, anyone could file a lawsuit that alleges anything. And it doesn't mean that those allegations are true. The challenge is for any individual, and I say this not because because now I do public relations. I say this as someone who's respected privacy and individual integrity throughout my career. It's very difficult to get your reputation back when you've been smeared by someone who has their own agenda, right? Doesn't necessarily uphold the facts in their allegations, but in the end creates a cloud of questions around your behavior. It's very difficult, especially if they have a lot of money. They can file a lawsuit, suggest things, make it seem like you did certain things. And then, unfortunately, the way that sometimes the media works, the traditional media, is that it will report the allegations in a lawsuit as though they were real, as though they are true. And that can create a whole lot of problems for anyone in the private sector now.
No, Oscar, if I can interrupt. John, you and I have a mutual friend, basically got into a lawsuit situation, filed a suit. And when he filed that suit, he put in all kinds of stuff, all kinds of maybe true, maybe false, but he was kneecapping the guy he was suing because he knew it would be a public record and the local press would have the ability to write about it with all freedom because it was part of a lawsuit. So, Mr. Fakler, can you address that? You and I both know who we're talking about. We're not going to mention the name. We won't get into any detail. Well, we do know people who have basically gone out there and threw a bunch of shit against the wall, true or false, and basically if he wasn't going to get paid, he was going to get his pound of flesh in terms of reputational costs.
The scorched earth approach is very effective. Let's be honest, because something's going to stick to that wall. And I'm just wondering, I'm not a Trump fan. I'm not going to talk about it, but I'm wondering if his approach.
Let's not talk about politics.
Oh, okay. All right. Scratch that. I'm wondering if the balls out approach, where you go after somebody that comes after you, is the most effective approach to this. And because you think about it, it works. It's like, okay, you start to think, okay, was this original complaint bullshit or not?
Yeah.
That might be another one.
Yeah, I think that's a different conversation because the goal of business is to complete transactions that benefit the person who's guiding that transaction. And you hope that everyone is dealing transparently and with transparency and with integrity. That's not always the case. In a situation like this, there was a lot of money involved, and there's a question as to how that money was applied to a project that a developer wanted to build.
Yeah, Oscar, the audience can go look up the story. If they do a search for Rishi Kapoor or Location Ventures, they're going to be able to find it. I don't want to get into too many details about that, but there's all kinds of allegations flying, basically one way or another. So I just don't want to go down that path. I figured we would tap into all the public relations and marketing expertise that we have on this panel.
Yeah, and I just to finish up, because you asked me a question I didn't really answer. I think
that's because you're in public relations.
I think the bottom line in a situation like this is that you need to be able to manage what is wrong in the public about the story. That's one of the most important aspects of this. is to make sure that what is wrong is corrected and corrected effectively. And that you also have a team around you that has various skill sets that's going to help you achieve your goal. And that could be everything from a public relations professional to an attorney to a spokesperson. It's depending on your resources, you can really bring in different people to help you in a situation like this. But it's extremely important to be able to make sure that the public record is correct. And that is one of the most difficult parts because you have to engage editors and reporters and explain to them why their story, where their story is right, and where their story is wrong. And you have to be authentic, credible, and transparent because otherwise you're going to get into trouble. It's not going to be an easy hill to climb. It takes a lot of time and it's complicated. But what John was saying regarding like a full-on offensive against anyone who's coming at you, I don't think that's in the long view an effective way of dealing with an issue like this because you're going to live here. It's going to affect your family and your children. And it's a very complicated issue. It's not easy. And we know both sides of this, being the reporter and also being on the public relations side.
John, before we finish up this pod, let me just get you to opine. Mr. Fakler says that anybody where there's allegations against them, they ought to come out swinging, if you will. Oscar's saying you run a risk of doing that. Where do you fall down? Because we haven't heard anything from this particular developer whatsoever. But then again, supposedly there's some federal agencies that are taking a look as well. So you're weighing all of it. What would you recommend, John?
Yeah. The problem here is that basically lawyers are running the show. So nothing can be said without considering the legal ramification. And to be honest, a lawyer is going to tell their client to say the least amount of possible, because if they screw up and say something stupid, it's going to get used against them. And there's a good chance of that happening. Some politicians that will not be mentioned are like the worst, are possibly the worst client because they shoot their mouths off. And then that stuff gets used in court. Whatever a developer says to the media is going to get used in court one way or another. It's going to get twisted. It's going to get, the fact of the matter is that lawyers are running the show. So you're not going to get any information and you're going to get basically speculation and people are going to speculate. And unfortunately, that's the way of the world now. And even when you have communications, I know a little bit about crisis communications. I don't practice crisis communications, but I know crisis communications PR people, and they will not talk to the clients. All their communications are with the lawyer because the lawyer has conversations with the lawyer are privileged. If they have conversations with their clients, all that they can be deposed. If you're a PR person, you can be deposed. The opposing counsel can come and say, what did you discuss? What was your strategy to overcome? How are you trying to mislead people? Blah, blah, blah. That's one of the reasons I don't do crisis communications at all, because you get sucked into it.
And it's a great point. I think crisis management is the most difficult part of PR. And I would actually lean to the side of Oscar, being very careful as you approach this and, trying to explain it to the client. But John brings up a really great point with the lawyers because you don't want to be dragged into this.
And the lawyers run the show. The lawyers run the show. And the client really, you've got to persuade the lawyer. And the lawyer's going to say, what, are you crazy? You going to talk to the media? Are you out of your mind? That's crazy. Like a lawyer's not going to let their client get near the newspaper. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That's just too much of a risk.
Wow, what a great first episode of season number 4. I want to thank each of you for participating. Everybody did a stand-up job once again. Also want to thank the audience for going ahead and listening through. John, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, tell them your Twitter handle. Also tell them your website.
Yeah, my website is grusspr.com, and you can actually click on contact me, and that'll send me a little message. My Twitter handle at John Gruss. I'm very active on Twitter. Check it all the time. Send me a message there too.
Mr. Musibay, great job. You were able to convince Mr. Fakler to give up his opinion and come over to your side. Very well done. If someone wants to get a hold of you, Oscar, they want to get some public relations or marketing consultation, crisis management, which I think you said you do. How do they get a hold of you and what's your Twitter handle?
So my Twitter handle is Musibay Reporter, and it's Musibay Reporter. And then on Instagram, it's Oscar Musibay. That's my full name.
Thank you, Oscar. And then finally, Mr. Fakler, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
My Twitter handle is @JTFakler, Fakler. You can also reach me by email, fakler@consultant.com. I also wanted to commend Oscar again for stepping all over my story, for holding court today. Thank you. Hopefully that won't happen next week. But that's
Sorry,
okay.
Fantastic. Fantastic. And let me just alert the audience. We're now selling merchandise. Believe it or not, you can get merchandise from the Miami Reporters Roundtable, selling t-shirts. We're selling flip-flops. We're selling floor mats outside of your door saying welcome. We're selling shower curtains. And also, too, each of our reporters that's coming on the podcast, you're going to be able to get, just like you would be able to get a Marvel comic book of a particular character, you're going to be able to buy a t-shirt with Mr. Fakler on it, Mr. Gruss on it, with Mr. Musibay. Yeah, so if you want to check out any of the merchandise, you can click on the link that's going to be in the description of the podcast. Or if you're old school, you can go to condovultures.creator-spring.com, condovultures.creator, CREATOR hyphen, that's that dash in the middle, and then spring, I can't wait for spring.com. So be sure to check that out. And remember, we're going to be doing our podcast once a week. As usual, this is season 4, and we are going to cut through some of the biggest stories going on in the South Florida area and give you, the audience, an idea what's really going on behind the scenes. And you can expect some real expertise as well as some entertainment. And don't forget to buy your t-shirt. Mr. Fakler's shower curtain is something you got to see first thing in the morning. So thanks for tuning in, and we will catch up with you soon. Ciao, ciao. This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures podcast. Before I started doing these podcasts, I was in the business of being a licensed real estate broker, a contributing columnist for the Miami Herald, as well as the Miami Real Deal, but also extra witness work in consulting. So if you are looking for an expert witness, or if you're looking for consulting services, a straight talk perspective as to what's going on in a particular marketplace, a building, or what happened previously, for whatever your situation is, whether you are an attorney, whether you are a institutional fund looking to invest, or whether you're a lender who's trying to come up with some sort of strategy and approach for your lending committee going forward, I just might be able to help you. To get a hold of me, please reach out to peter@condovultures.com. That's peter@condovultures.com, or give me a call to the office at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859.
It's a simple formula, and it works. Buy low, sell high. We're Condo Vultures, and when it comes to your real estate, we help you buy low. At Condo Vultures, we represent the buyer, and now's the time to buy. Log on to condovultures.com for more information. condovultures.com. And remember, before you sell high, you have to buy low. Featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, 60 Minutes, and Time Magazine. Condo Vultures Realty, a licensed Florida real estate brokerage capitalizing on the condo correction since 2006.